So it seems Magnus is struggling in 9th edition and in today's current meta. With all the new and upcoming codexes, he's having a rough time. So I want to talk about a few pros and cons and what's the best way to get your efficiency out of your Magnus the Red. Stick around and stay tuned. What's going on, everybody? The Black Rage here with another exclusive video, and man, I can get groovy with that. I can listen to that all day. Thanks guys for the few subscribers that's coming in again, and keep watching my videos and keep hitting that like and subscribe button for me. I want to get to that 1,000 point at some point. 1,000 point at some point, get it? 1,000 mark at some point. But I'm gonna go ahead and get right to it. I'm gonna jump into Magnus the Red. My experience with him in 9th edition so far. I've gotten about some games in, and I want to talk about what his experience is like, pros and cons, and maybe what's the best efficient way we could keep him on a table or before he dies. So let's get right to it. So I got 5 pros and I got 5 cons. I know everyone kind of does pros and cons, but I'm gonna do a little backwards. I'm gonna go with cons and pros. Not getting the Great Cult keyword, that was a big setback for me because he gets 3 warlord traits and +1 selection from one of his 7 Great Plate companies. That's a win for him. Still in 9th edition, a struggle because he's such a great big target and he still kind of dies, but he absorbs a lot of great firepower. Magnus, on the other hand, got 3 warlord traits and got no cults of any kind at all. See how they did, my boy? So that was kind of a gripe for me. I wish they could have maybe given him the same treatment, maybe having him select 1 warlord trait from the great cults of 9. Coming in at number 4, his attacks. So nothing against his attacks at all. I just think he's very strong in close combat. He's got 8 attacks to start with, but a sweep attack would have been nice, even if it only gave him 2 per 1. So he would have had 16 attacks. Maybe he's hitting at strength 6 or AP -2, 2 damage or something like that. It would kind of help him shape close combat up a little bit. So that was my gripe about that. Also, attacks, I'm going to go ahead and fill in with smites. The smite nerf, I really missed the 2d6 mortal wounds now, and it's starting to affect because there's been some games where I've gotten super smites off with Magnus, but I ended up rolling like 3 1s. Cool, there's my 3 mortal wounds. I might as well should have just doom bolted instead. Yay. Coming in at number 3, him being 18 wounds, it does kind of suck because he can be shot from anywhere on a table, and not being under at least 18 wounds could have kind of saved him in obscurity. But even at 16 wounds, he's such a huge model with his big wings, so he's still gonna get shot across the table. My number 2 complaint, gap closing. Magnus now struggles with gap closing because they took away warp time and only made it to where it affects infantry models only. Magnus being a monster does not affect him, so it did kind of slow him down a little. So it's not Magnus Hammer, or should I say Hero Hammer, Magnus Hammer, whatever you want to call it. It's balanced, but then it is kind of hard for him to gap close certain units that are just going to obliterate him. It also makes it to where he can't really sit behind the back of the table anymore, because if he's too far back, then he becomes useless kind of towards the army. So you kind of still got to put him in the middle point. My number 1 complaint is defense. Magnus could have gotten a better resiliency to damage. Mortarion, they did it right. You know, he has -1 damage, would feel no pain. Magnus, they could have maybe did something to where he takes D3 less, or maybe half damage at a turn or something like that. Or, you know, there's a little theory that I'm hoping to see, but I'll get into that a little bit later on. That would have been awesome, but yeah, the lack of defense really kind of hurt him, and you know, maybe like a -1 to wound or anything in that nature. That would have been helpful, but it does hurt. You know, he is toughness 7, so him not going to toughness 8 also hurts. And I started to feel the effects of this in game. So I'm sure the rest of you have or will when you start to play him, or if you play him. I recommend just at least trying him out in 9th edition. He's not that bad. It just comes down to positioning. So that's my cons. Let's move to the pro list. Coming in at 5, his strength. He's still strength 8 times 2, 16 with his blade, -4, damage 3. Not too shabby. I was hoping for a D3 plus 3 damage, but it kind of does make him as strong as Mortarion, which we all know Mortarion's just freaking monster in close combat. Not as fast, but he is a powerhouse, so it kind of does make sense. He can still deal with like hero knights and bigger targets, so not too bad there for me. My number 4 is going to be support for rubrics and terminators. Magnus is a huge asset to the troops now, just because he can provide auras to the rubric marines and the terminators that are around him, so it becomes very relevant to have him as more of a support character, so he kind of sits back and helps support his fellow troops rather than kind of being Magnus Hammer going forward and trying to, you know, single-handedly deal with stuff himself, which we all know that was fun, Magnus, but now they're trying to put him into a support role. Problem is, I wish his defense would have been better, but that's kind of what we have to deal with at the moment. Number 3 is probably going to be a tank. He can absorb a lot of firepower. Yes, he can probably die turn 1, but if he's taking damage, that means your Terminators and your Rubrics aren't taking damage. I mean, with the chapter approved changing, the game has definitely evolved around objectives now, so we maybe may see some Mutalith Vortex Beasts on the field to kind of go forward. Magnus, Helldrakes, stuff like that to take the aggro off of him and whatnot. So number 2 for me is going to be that he has all powers and plus smite, so he knows all the powers from the Tzeentch chart. Sadly, he doesn't know any of the cult powers because he doesn't have the great keyword GW, thank you, but he does know all powers and smite. So in situations where it's like you need to Twisted Faith someone, you can take away their invulnerable save. It helps, you know, if Magnus is fighting something close, he can kind of just get up and stick him, stab him, jab him, whatever it is with his staff. Who knows? But yeah, being able to flex through all 14 powers and rotate them is pretty good for me. Last on the list for me is his casting and denying power. Magnus probably is one of the best sorcerer psychers in the game, kinda, but he has +3 to cast because he has keyword arcane Astartes, which gives him +1, and then if he's above 10 wounds, he gets +2, +3. So, and if he can re-roll all psychic powers and denies. Also, it doesn't say fail, it just says reroll. He's immune to perils, so he doesn't have to worry about perils at all. But given something that you just don't want to go off, he gets to reroll this with this high modifier reroll. So that's my wrap up for pros and cons. That's what I've chosen. Let me know what some of you guys think, goods and bads and stuff. I'm always open to listening and hearing everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the conclusion and maybe some of the future things and expectancies for him. So hopefully we get some kind of Book of Renown soon. It just seems like Thousand Sons are starting to really fall against certain armies, especially Adeptus Custodes, Templar. I wouldn't necessarily say Templar, but Custodes is one of our biggest counters right now. Eldari getting all their luscious damage, and Avatar, which we're not too worried about because we have stuff that can deal with Avatar, a Relic, ignoring all modifiers to hit, to wound, damage, stuff like that. Avatar can get kind of blown off with macro firepower. Now, some of the ways of playing Magnus to me is always going to be positioning, deploy him last, dead last. Always figure out where that heavy firepower is going to be. Deploy him on the other side of where that heavy firepower. But if people are deploying stuff in the middle, it is kind of like you got to pick your poison. You're going to take the damage. It's kind of like what it's going to happen. He's going to get shot at. He might die, or he may live. Or, you know, you got to kind of put in your mindset, if he dies, he dies. If he dies, he dies. But you got to try to reserve his power as much as you can. Getting him up on the front line. You just have to. You really can't hide him anymore because he lost that double move. He doesn't have that 3-up invulnerable anymore. So it's one of those things that we got to just accept and move on. I know people are going to say he's not the greatest in 9th edition anymore. In my opinion, I don't think so either, but I'm still going to play him because I didn't spend that much money for a model to get benched. This is a game of 40K. I'm going to play him because I bought the model. Now, there's nothing that's restricting people from playing Magnus. Play your Primarch, play your model. I know there's most of the tournaments out there now are like hyper competitive, and they kind of just list bully you if you brought Magnus. They kind of say, oh, Magnus sucks, why did you bring him? I've heard it before, and you should be entitled to bring whatever it is that you like against friends, whether it's tournaments, wherever you go, bring what you like. On the flip side, if you do decide to beat those internet lists, or these meta lists, or whoever wants to be the next best Richard Sigler or Nick Navadati, if you do decide to do that, then that's on you. But be yourself. Most importantly, be yourself, and I cannot stress that any more or any less. But that's gonna wrap it up, guys. Again, on a footnote for Magnus, just try to avoid the heavy firepower. I know it's hard, but he's really good against damage 3 because he has their damage reduction to 2 and damage 2 to 1. So anything that's above damage 3 kind of hurts. D3 plus 3 damage is his worst nightmare at the moment because rolling high sucks. That's gonna do it for today. I wanted to keep this video short. Again, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much. I'll be making more of these videos, and I hope to see you in the next video.